20 years after the awesome success of Pong, video games had morphed from a geeky hobby for computer engineers to addictive entertainment for the masses. And like all success stories, the industry soon attracted the attention of big business and lawmakers. Okay, let's back up to 1981 for a second. This is the original Castle Wolfenstein, a classic let's fight the Nazis computer game. When it came to action gaming, this was as good as it got. But just 11 years later, technology would take it from this to this. Wolfenstein 3D was the brainchild of id Software, a company run by two young game designers named John Carmack and John Romero. Based in Texas and both in their early 20s, they were hardcore gamers with a passion for movies like Aliens and Evil Dead, and a love for heavy metal music. Combine these influences with Carmack's recent mastery of smooth scrolling 3D graphics for the PC, and you got one of 1992's breakout computer games, especially when the buzz got out about its blood and gore content.
People were quite literally blown away by it because they never seen anything like this. And it really showed that there could be this whole interesting, compelling, edgy gaming experience on a PC that you weren't able to find on consoles or necessarily in arcades.
It was also one of the first games to be played through a first-person perspective. Since you needed to shoot a lot of people to win, it helped coin the video game genre title, first-person shooter.
First-person shooter is where your eyes are the monitor, basically, and you get to see your hands or your weapon or whatever in front of you, so it's you. And first-person to us was the most successful interface that there was because you didn't have to think about anything but just what you're doing in the game.
But the best thing about Wolfenstein 3D was the way it was sold. With more and more computers hooking up to the internet, Carmack and Romero could take advantage of a new distribution system called shareware.
Shareware was a really, really radical concept at the time because what it basically meant is that you would be giving games away online, portions of a game, hoping that people got hooked.
Here's the first third in a trilogy that you get for free, and you leave them with a cliffhanger and all this stuff, so they have to buy the other two.
And it was like crack, basically, over the internet.
And a lot of people got hooked on Wolfenstein's hardcore style. 18 months later, Carmack and Romero gave them their next fix. The game was called Doom.
December 10th of 1993, when we released Doom, we'd been up for about 30 hours before that working.
Id was trying to get this uploaded, but there were so many people waiting online that id could not get in to upload it.
And the files in the drive should have been an empty directory, but people were putting sentences in there as file names. They're making, when will it be here, you know, and hurry up and stuff. It's like a whole directory full of sentences, and we're just like, these people are insane.
What it had to do was to tell everybody to just back off, don't come on for a few minutes while they upload the game.
When it came to graphic action and intensity, Doom pushed it farther than Wolfenstein and was an even bigger success.
My most seminal gaming experience was playing Doom with my headphones on late at night with my wife asleep in the other room and being really terrified. And feeling stupid for being terrified, but still being terrified.
The other thing that made Doom appealing to gamers was its multiplayer capabilities.
Go, go, go.
Network a few computers together, and you could start shooting at your buddies inside the same game.
Here they come, here they come.
Carmack and Romero called it deathmatching.
But through all of pretty much 1994, I was just addicted to deathmatch. It was just the coolest thing I'd ever experienced in my entire life.
For two young guys in their 20s, the success of Doom was a dream come true. Practically overnight, the id Software founders had become multi-millionaires.
I totally had fun buying, you know, fun cars and houses and all that kind of stuff.
Romero would show up at gaming conventions and there would be people literally bowing at his feet and doing the Wayne's World, I'm not worthy. They really were the rock stars at that time. And then when all of the controversy came out over violent games, then they had all of that too to kind of stoke their image.
In the year leading up to Doom's release, violent video games had become headline newsmakers, but not in a good way. popularity of games like Street Fighter II and Mortal Kombat among young children and teenagers had parents and lawmakers blaming video games for everything, from unfinished homework to antisocial behavior and rising street crime. In late 1993, the issue was picked up by Connecticut Senator Joseph Lieberman, who formed a Senate committee to investigate video game violence.
We're not talking about Pac-Man or Space Invaders anymore. We're talking about video games that too often glorify violence and teach children to enjoy inflicting the most gruesome forms of cruelty imaginable. We are calling on the video game industry today to recognize its responsibility to the parents and children of this country.
Lieberman's Senate committee wagged their finger at the uncensored version of Mortal Kombat and an obscure game called Night Trap.
In the game, you play a guy who's trying to protect a house full of sorority girls that are being attacked by these fledgling vampires who apparently don't have fangs yet, so they use this grill contraption that hooks up to the neck and sucks their blood out. The game wasn't selling. It wasn't fun. It was a silly game.
Lieberman called it gratuitous and offensive and ought not to be available to people in our society. His comments turned Night Trap into one of the biggest selling games of the year. The other result of the government hearing was that all major game producers agreed to set up the Entertainment Software Rating Board to rate games. Violence didn't go away, but now it came with a warning.
I was actually a key proponent in the creation of the rating system for video games. So I'm a big believer in honest packaging and providing consumers with all the information they need to make a good product decision and to know what they're getting.
You don't let your kids see R-rated movies. You shouldn't let your kids play M-rated games. And once that becomes more ingrained in American culture, in everyone's minds, then the whole violence issue in video games will become less of an issue.
With the government battle behind them, Sega and Nintendo were now free to start beating each other up in the marketplace again. Sega fired the first volley by announcing their plan to launch a new home system called the Saturn, which would operate exclusively from a CD-ROM drive.
Nintendo said, well, if they're going to do it, we've got to do it. And so Nintendo partnered with Sony, and they created a CD player for the Super Nintendo called the PlayStation. Only then Nintendo decided, you know what, we don't trust Sony very much. And they partnered up with Philips. They left Sony standing at the altar.
And as anyone who's been left at the altar knows, revenge can be sweet. Nintendo's and Philips' plans for a CD-ROM system began to fall apart, and consumer electronics giant Sony decided they could make it in the video game industry all by themselves.
They kept the name PlayStation, which I think was a real thumbing of the nose at Nintendo.
Everybody knows Sony as a company that makes Walkmans and electronics, and then gradually over time, consumers have accepted that Sony represents really good quality stuff. It was a natural progression. And then with the PlayStation, they just dropped the bomb. It was incredible.
The Sony PlayStation hit the shelves in September 1995 and immediately left Sega's new system, the Saturn, in the dust.
Technologically, you could tell that the Saturn was way behind the PlayStation. The PlayStation handled 3D. All of a sudden, there was no competition because here's Sony, they've got a better unit. The unit's $100 cheaper, and they've got all the games. You can't compete with something like that.
Especially when Lara Croft was playing on their team.
Thank you.
When Tomb Raider first came out in 1996, it was only available for the PlayStation.
You had not only a female lead character, but a sexy one, who had big boobs and short shorts. She became really popular, and the game itself was incredible. So Tomb Raider was one of the key games that helped make PlayStation.
Two of the other games that helped push the PlayStation to success were a fighting game called Tekken and Crash Bandicoot. Crash did for Sony what Mario and Sonic had done for their competitors, and the character became sort of an unofficial PlayStation mascot. Sega just couldn't compete with the might of Sony. In 1999, Sega launched another console, the Dreamcast. It bombed. Sega quietly dropped out of the console market to concentrate on game development. Sony planned to follow up the PlayStation with the PlayStation 2. which would be more of a multimedia machine, able to play CD music and DVD movies. But just when it looked like Nintendo would be the only competition, a Seattle-based company decided it was time to get into the business. Oh, and that company was just about the biggest in the US, Microsoft.
There were a lot of people saying, you know, Sony's going to replace the PC with PS2. It occurred to me that the only way to really counter that would be to make a dedicated device, to make a game console.
But Microsoft was all about software and had trouble convincing people in the game business that they knew what they were doing.
And we had about 6 months of not really being taken seriously because, you know, I would show up or, you know, some other guys would show up and say, hey, we're from Microsoft and we're making a game console that will compete with Sony now. That's a hard thing to say. That's like saying we're from the government, we're here to help.
But it turned out that Microsoft did know what they were doing.
4, 3, 2, 1.
They even got the fact that hardware was useless without killer games. When the software giant released the Xbox in 2001, they had an exclusive on a new first-person shooter, Halo.
If you look at successful console launches, and you'll see the console becomes a player for the popular game. Xbox became the Halo player. Yes, this black device with the green circle on it plays Halo.
Halo is a big hit because the critics loved it, then the hardcore gamers really picked up on it, and then word of mouth spread.
Microsoft might have established their gaming credentials, but along with Nintendo's new mini-disc system, the GameCube, the Xbox was still chasing the market leader, Sony's PlayStation 2. Now some of the biggest multimedia corporations in the world were gaining control of the video game industry. Real proof that there were big bucks to be made and that video games were now a major part of the entertainment business. And as entertainers, the game designers would have to keep the hits coming.